Jerusalem Press Club, and we're very happy to host a distinguished panel here, and we do it under the umbrella of Fuente Latina. And Mr. Ravel here will say a few words and will introduce the panelists. Please turn off your cell phone or switch them into silent mode, so we are all happy here without interruptions. And Hamutal, please.
Okay, so the timing was not the best timing for us because we are speaking about 31 of December, and a lot of people are on vacation or celebrating the eve of the new year. But we wanted to do it around the timing of the visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu to Brazil. It made a lot of sense to us, and we thought of bringing a puzzle of Brazil, from the diplomatic state of view, from the business or economy state of view, and from the academic or the general perspective. And this is why we invited, and we're very grateful that you could make it to Jerusalem today, Tzipora Rimon, which was the former ambassador to Brazil. Tzipora served for many years as a diplomat of career at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She was posted to Chicago as a Consul General. She served in Copenhagen, and she came for the second time also to Portugal as her last job as an ambassador to Lisbon. Tzipora also worked with the economy affairs and the European Union, and she will give us the diplomatic perspective of Brazil. We also have the former chairman of the Israel-Brazil Chamber of Commerce, Rosenblatt-Nir. He served in Sao Paulo for almost 6 years, right? Almost 6 years, and he was working for the Ministry of Economy and under many different titles. We have with us also Dr. Mauricio Diman, which is a postdoctoral research for the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's also a coordinator of the Latin American unit for Truman Research Institute, and you can Google Dr. Diman and see his comments in the Israeli press even in the last few days. So thank you very much for being here, and we'll start with Tiki.
Okay, so just a reminder, 71 years ago, at the famous UN right? The UN resolution about the partition of Palestine, the chairman was He says, Argentina, yes, no, and all this. So we are just bringing it as a reminder that Brazil had a stake in Israel's emergence. Ambassador Rimon served between 2004 and 2008. So tell us a bit about the diplomatic relations then, and maybe then we'll take it to today as well.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank the Jerusalem Press Club
and for Latina.
And, of course, the initiative was from Fuente Latina, Hamutal, for inviting me. All of a sudden, after 10 years, when I left, and I do that with great pleasure. And hello to my colleagues here at the panel. Rosenblatt-Nir, I knew him from the period we played the same period in Brazil, and first time to know Dr. Mauricio Diman. As I said, 10 years have passed. They passed very fast. But the experience, the awareness, knowing, acquaintance with Brazil, it's been culture, local culture. For me, it's one part, very important part in the diplomatic is also knowing the arts, the music. I'm a great fan of the Brazilian, the popular music, música popular brasileira. This is fantastic, and I cannot miss one part, very important also to me, is the soccer. I'm a great fan of football, as they say. And I did it in Italy, I did it in Portugal, but mainly...
So we don't mention the 7-1 defeat to Germany. So we don't talk about that.
No, we don't. No,
Please don't embarrass us.
definitely not. I thought I will jump. No, but this is one part. It was a very important part to know, getting to know his whole experience. And I really continue to accompany what are the developments through the media, actually, what's going on in Brazil since then. But I will concentrate on that period and my experience, because you'll see that it's not only the discovery of Brazil now. There were a lot of things, and Uri Dromi mentioned a very important part. I mentioned it also in here. But I would like to start with few words in Brazil that time, when I came. And also parallelly what happened in the Middle East, and all those two sides really affected the relations that time between Israel and Brazil. Brazil was and has been now, until now, it's very central in Latin America, especially in South America, and in that perspective, context also the President Lula, that time, this period, and it was really taking off his leadership in Brazil itself, but also in the region, and with all ambitions, we shall see later on. But that was a period of really a growth, economic growth. It was a boom. And self-supply of energy, and I'm not entering into all aspects of that, but really a great period, and Brazil played a great role in the framework, international framework, like BRIC, later on BRICS, all those with other countries like Russia, China, and India, and South Africa later on, and G20. So just in a perspective, and beyond that, there was a great ambitions for the ambitions from the point of view of foreign policy, especially as the engine in that period. There was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Celso Amorim, that was really with a lot of initiatives and with ambitions. Like for instance, they initiatives for summits. Huge summits between America del Sur, South America, with blocks of countries. For us, relevant is the bloc of Arab countries. And Arab countries, good relations with Arab countries. There are more than 10 million people from Arab countries. I mean, they are the descendants. But 10 million. Parallel to the Jewish community, which was a little bit smaller. But at that time, the initiative for the summit with Arab bloc, with Arab League, it was 2005. For me, it was a great challenge because, as you know, writing the declaration and the text of the Arab countries vis-à-vis the text of the other countries, the South American countries, there was a great deal of working on that, and in the end the version was, for us, we could live with this, but it was really a big period. They continue with that, but in the end it faded away. But there were some other summits with Africa countries, with Asia, and with Europe as well. So that is Brazil of that time. It was for our point of view, our developments in the region, Yasser Arafat, death of Yasser Arafat, November 2004, Israel leaves Gaza Strip, Hamas came to power in the Gaza. Was the second Lebanon war. From point of the Brazil was very important because a lot of descendants are from Lebanon. We had a lot of Lebanese with a Brazilian passport, and we worked quite a lot closely with the evacuation. And in the end, Annapolis conference, that Brazil insisted of participating in that a solution of two states, two countries. So Brazil at that time also a great wish to play a role in the Middle East. They nominated envoy. They opened an office in Ramallah, and they participated, as I mentioned, in Brazil. Only a few more sentences.
Okay.
The relations of Brazil, how Brazil saw Israel, and I wrote here Osvaldo Aranya, so I will not repeat.
I'm sorry.
No,
Spoiling
it was really a very important when you think about Realpolitik or friendship, or that was a very crucial moment for Israel, and he's not only read the result, he was very much involved with all the process, and he supported this resolution, and later on Brazil recognized the state of Israel in February 1949. So this is a very important perspective. There was a great honor the Jewish community in Brazil. Many years earlier came involved in all the life of, although they exaggerate a little bit because it was much smaller than the Arab. And then the achievements of Israel, achievements with the early years, the establishment of the state, but the science, technology, medicine, agriculture, water, all those issues, really, it was great admiration and served as basis for our relation. Basically, there was an attitude of pro-Arab, pro-Palestinians, criticized a lot Israel, especially in the media, during the wars, the operations and other. But yet, certainly when Israel left the Gaza Strip and other, there was a tendency much for openness. And they in the media, for instance, they interviewed Israelis, op-eds and other, and they took also parallelly the Israeli argument. There were several, I'm not reading all the visits, but there were several visits of senior in the political arena, economic and also security. Celso Amorim, Minister of Foreign Affairs, twice visited Israel, that time 2005 and 2007. By the way, the second time he admired the late writer Amos Oz, and we arranged a meeting with him during the visit, and that was really the peak. And a lot of agreements. I know, and myself as well, sometimes I'm skeptical because you sign an agreement, but not always fulfill it. But it was important for getting the environment and other, and there's all set of agreements with agriculture, with water. Yeah, I'm not entering into all that. Even the culture. So they're all set that really gave the two parties to sit together and elaborate, and of course the challenge of implementation. For me, and Roy will elaborate on that, that was Mercosur, agreement of free trade area agreement between Israel and Mercosur. We already asked for that in 1997, but they put us aside because they were very much involved with the EU, the European Union. Once they couldn't, they failed with the European Union, they, especially the Brazilians, the minister, to allow to do that with Israel, and we did it. Vice Prime Minister Olmert, Minister of Trade and Industry at that time, came to Brazil. I was launching the negotiations that signed December 2007.
Thank you. This is a very good introduction. We'll move to today's relations later, but now to the, we give us some introduction into the economic and trade relations. I believe it's around $1 billion, $1.3 billion, but they're trading more with the Arab world. So how does it balance?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Chomutan, for the Latina and for the JPC. Glad to be here, and let's talk a little bit about the relations, the economic relations between Israel and Brazil. I think that in Brazil we see a phenomenon that we see in other countries as well, in which the economic relations are less influenced by the political arena. Like, of course, that the political ties knew ups and downs. We're in the big up now, but as Tziki mentioned, traditionally Brazil was much more pro-Arab. But on the economic arena, we didn't see these movements. We have a stable economic ties with Brazil. Of course, the potential is much bigger than we actually have now. But these are not for political reasons, I believe, but for other reasons. I'll go into it in a second. But we do have quite a stable relationship. It's a good thing on one hand that it's stable. On the other hand, for many years we are trying to expand this potential. We are trying to expand these relations, and they are more or less stagnated. So we do not get out of this 1.2, 1.3, 1.1 billion dollars of commerce per year. And we tried. We are trying quite a lot. The Israeli ministries of foreign affairs and economy are investing a lot of money in trying to expand these relations. We did an agreement, as Tziki mentioned, the free trade agreement between Israel and Mercosur. That, by the way, is almost the only agreement that free trade agreement that Mercosur has with countries outside Latin America. The other one is the one with Egypt, and there was one with the Palestinian Authority, but that wasn't even ratified till now. So Israel is basically the only country outside Latin America that has a free trade agreement with Mercosur, and as such with Brazil. So we made a lot of effort in order to expand these relations, and still, due to, of course, also the economic situation in Brazil, which sees, as you probably know, a lot of ups and downs, and recently, in the last 4 years at least, it's very much on the downside. We hope that it will grow in the next few years. It shows some signs of early growth. Probably 2008 would end with a growth of 1.2, 1.3%. These are the estimates. So it's not a massive growth, but at least it's not a recession. Brazil seems to be out of the recession. Let's see what the new government will bring. And so the trade between Israel and Brazil was also influenced from these reasons. And we saw, for instance, in 2009 was a big drop in the trade because of the world economic crisis. And then again, we came back to around 1.3. Now, the trade is not balanced. We export much more than we import. Israel exports much more than it imports. We export around 1 billion and we import around 300 million. So there's a big deficit from the Brazilian side. It's very unbalanced. Again, these are for somehow objective and historical reasons. Israel is a big supplier for Brazil of fertilizantes. Of fertilizers and other chemicals. So we export a great deal of these products to Brazil. It's almost 70% of Israel's export to Brazil is chemicals. And we import only a few food products, like especially meat, soy, sugar, some juices. So historically, these are the two main poles of trade. Now we are trying to diversify it, Unfortunately, from the Brazilian side, it's very difficult to attract the Brazilians exporter, the Brazilian industry to invest in Israel. First, because we're a small market, they see us as a very small market, far away in the Middle East. So it's not a big thing for them to try to develop trade with Israel. Second, as you mentioned, they trade a lot with the Arab world. They have very strong economical ties with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, with the UAE, with all the Arab countries. So Israel is not a big point of interest for them. So we're not able to attract the Brazilian exports to Israel. And on the other side, from the Israeli side, we are trying to diversify, but we need to understand that Brazil is a difficult market. If you want to export to Brazil, it's still a very difficult market. It's protectionist, even though we have the agreement. So it is protectionist in other ways. It has.
What about know-how, like desalination, solar systems?
So that's what we are trying to do for many years. I hope that with Bolsonaro, with the new government, because of the fact that Bolsonaro is a big fan of Israel, he was here, he wants to learn from Israel, he wants to cooperate. So maybe now is the time that we'll do the big breakthrough. Till now, it was still in small numbers. So, but still, small numbers, but stable. We do need to remember, I don't want to underestimate, we do need to remember that Brazil is, for the last 2-3 years, is one of the 10 main export destinations of Israel. It's number 9, number 10 usually, but it's a big market for Israel, even though one of the biggest. Yeah, it's not one of the biggest. Now, the Mercosur agreement, as Tziki mentioned, it was a big attempt to try and break these barriers. Brazil has other barriers that it puts in regulations, in bureaucracy. Brazil is very bureaucratic in the way it handles trade, and unfortunately it didn't do the big breakthrough. The Mercosur agreement is somehow out of date now. We need to update the agreement. Maybe it's something also on the agenda. I hope it's also on the agenda with the new government. Something that we did try to do quite a lot is trying to develop the R&D cooperation. Israel has a lot to contribute in this field, technology, R&D in other fields. We have some agreements in that. I cannot say that they are fully explored. We still have a good way to go in order to explore these agreements, but they are there and they are ready to be explored. And what are I would add just what are the potential from, at least from the Israeli side. We see it especially in the other than chemicals, of course, and phosphates and whatever we do now. We see it in security, in HLS, in homeland security. A lot of needs in Brazil. Unfortunately, Brazil suffers a great deal on that aspect. So Israel has a lot to offer. We can expand on that. We can expand on telecommunications. In such a huge country like Brazil, Israel has a lot of technology to offer. Drones as well, as the mayor of Rio lately visited, and unfortunately in the Brazilian media it didn't come out so well. It looked as if the headlines were that he's looking for drones to shoot the drug dealers in the favelas. I'm not sure that's what he really wanted, but that's how it looked in the Brazilian media. Water, desalination, we have a lot to contribute, especially in the northeast of Brazil, where they have the same challenges that we have with water. So we have lots of technologies we can offer there. Cyber technology, as in around the world. Medical equipment, Brazil has a very big medical system. And on the Brazilian side, we can definitely expand commodities. We have lots of commodities that we bring from other places in the world that we can bring from Brazil under the terms of the Israel-Mercosur agreement. And there's a very interesting issue of gas, the exploration of natural gas. Brazil has deep water natural gas and petroleum that it explores on the beaches of on the littoral, in the sea. In front of Sao Paulo state and Rio de Janeiro, and Israel now has the big exploration in our sea, in RC. So we have a lot to learn from the Brazilian in that, and we wanna attract investment even from Petrobras, which is still one of the biggest petroleum company in the world. One last thing, because Mauricio will probably talk a lot about moving the embassy. So I think that one thing that we need to remember on the economic side of that, there were a lot of media reports lately in Brazil saying that the move of the embassy would hurt the ties with the Arab world, and basically the Arabs would boycott the Brazilian halal meat that they're exporting. And there's a big campaign around it. I think that one of the things that Netanyahu would like to do right now is to calm them down on that. I don't think that, I think that it's more of a threat. Yeah, we will do that, but I don't see the Saudi Arabia or the UAE actually boycotting Brazilian meat just because he moved the embassy.
Okay, thank you very much, Nia. This is really adding the economic component to it. Now, Mauricio, Tzipora left Brazil in 2008. And then everything collapsed because 2010 they recognized the Palestinian state. In 2014, during the war in Gaza, they recalled the ambassador for consultations. In 2016, when the same Netanyahu appointed Danny Dayan as an ambassador, and Brazil said no because he's the head of Council, and Netanyahu, the same Netanyahu said either Dayan or no ambassador at all, and eventually they got somebody else from the Sheva, I think, Likud operative. But anyway, today we hear that Bolsonaro says we are brothers. What happened?
Okay, first I would like to thank Delapina and Juliet for inviting me for the organization of this event. Maybe continue this discussion from an analytical perspective. Okay, I would like to present three subjects about this new period in Brazil that, in my opinion, did not receive enough attention and will help to deepen understanding of the challenges of the Bolsonaro administration. The first subject is the question about the future of the economic relation between Israel and Brazil. Especially, how will the Bolsonaro administration articulate the relations with Israel in the context of economic crisis? In my opinion, if their economic approach to Israel will be only or merely as a market for Brazilian products and of products for Brazilians, we will see more symbolic than concrete changes in the Israeli-Brazilian relation. The Bolsonaro administration will have to deal with the very difficult economic challenges, and thus its main goal or need will be to increase the participation of Brazil in international markets. In other words, the international policy of Brazil regarding Israel could not complicate its needs for markets in this context of economic crisis. In the current situation of Brazil, the Bolsonaro administration will not have the political and economic capacity to affect the relations with other countries and markets. Therefore, in this scenario, it is reasonable to expect more continuity than changes with Israel, or changes that will be more symbolic than concrete. On the other hand, if the policies of the Bolsonaro administration will construct economic relations with Israel as a strategic process of innovation, for example, as part of a special context in which the Israeli economy could help the Brazilian economy not only to make a qualitative leap in modernization and competitiveness, but also to deal with significant local needs, then we can think about a new period of changes. Bolsonaro publicly spoke about it, but this must be seen in actions rather than words. The problem in this scenario would be time. How much time of political support will Bolsonaro have to change policies that that can economically benefit the country only in the medium and long term, but not immediately. I don't have a clear answer to this question, but this concern allows me to introduce the second subject that I consider important to discuss. Will Bolsonaro's political support allow him to make changes in Brazilian foreign policy? As you know, the common denominator of Bolsonaro's supporters was to put an end to the Lula era in the Brazilian government. Bolsonaro does not have a strong political support structure of his own. Therefore, once the purpose of the election has been achieved, it will be necessary to see to what extent will this support in the rejection of Lula could be translated into support for new policies in a context of economic crisis and unpopular decisions. Furthermore, it is expected that Bolsonaro will need to expand, not just maintain, his political base of support. With his current base of support, it will be very difficult for his government to make important changes in the current economic context of Brazil. It will be necessary to see the capacity of Bolsonaro to deal with this challenge. His voters supported him in the elections, but do not share with him most of his statements about the situation in Brazil. This challenge allows us to assume that if Bolsonaro cannot make structural changes in the beginning of his administration, including changes in the Brazilian foreign policy, it will be more difficult for him to do it later. Not only because the comparative effect with Lula will be less relevant for achieving consensus in the Brazilian society, but mainly because in case of having to make unpopular economic decisions, Bolsonaro will probably lose popularity. Only, or mainly, a favorable international economic context would allow him to increase his support base, a scenario that is uncertain. And this brings us to the previous discussion. Brazil does not have much possibilities to make decisions in its foreign policy that will generate more uncertainty in its economic situation. Therefore, the political and economic challenges of Bolsonaro impose the question of time, and we will have to see to what extent he manages to maintain support of his policies in a delicate economic context. In my opinion, Bolsonaro understands the situation perfectly, and in this framework we have to contextualize his recent public announcements. Before moving on to the third issue of discussion, and as a way to connect them, I would like to make a comment. In my opinion, it's important not only to differentiate between symbolic decisions from changes in policies, but it's also necessary to understand the limitations of political capabilities of Latin American presidents, regardless of ideological interests and identifications. A good example that illustrates this aspect is the case of President Macri in Argentina. Despite his power in the Argentina National Football Organization and his good relations with the current Israeli government, it was impossible for him to organize the football game of the Argentine national team in Israel in the context of the celebration of Israel anniversary. Despite this failure, this case did not affect the relationship between the two countries. In this sense, I consider that the capacities of the new Brazilian government should be observed from this experience.
Which brings us to the question of moving them.
Yes. The last subject that I would like to comment on as a closing remark is the possible impact of changes in the policies of Brazil's new government on Latin America, specifically the impact that the international policy of Brazil could have on the region. And the answer to this question is not very clear at this moment. Although a general change in the political colors of most Latin American governments can be seen, putting an end to a decade of government with certain common characteristics, most of the countries are quite distant from Bolsonaro's victory. In other words, although historically Brazil has played a leading role in the foreign policy of the region, it is still not clear how the rest of the Latin American countries will consider Bolsonaro's policies. They will either see them as a model of a new era in the region or as an isolated and temporary case from which they will take some distance. At the same time, several countries in Latin America have begun to have a more individual relations with Israel, less regional, considering it, in general, as a strategic partner for their own local needs. Whatever the answer, Bolsonaro will have the pressure to deal not only with the various challenges that Brazil faces, but also with his promises to different actors during his campaign. In this sense, it's possible to assume that Bolsonaro in the government will not be the same as the Bolsonaro that we saw during the campaign, and the questions mentioned will remain open for a while.
Okay, thank you. We didn't mention one thing. I mean, Bolsonaro is called Trump of the tropics. And this bonding between Netanyahu and Bolsonaro, in light of the greater bonding of Netanyahu with Trump, how does it seem in a country which just elected a right-wing president, but is still dominated by a lot of socialist elements?
Brazil is not the US. Brazil hasn't the possibility to take the same kind of decision that the US. It's not the same context, and I think that okay, maybe here they can explain more than me, but I think that it will be very difficult for him to take the same decisions that the US, especially now.
So, in other words, will he move the embassy to Jerusalem?
It's possible, but it's very difficult.
So time will tell. Okay.
Wait, sorry,
Let's
just a direct question to that. I mean, but if there was a trade there, if he were moving the embassy in exchange for tangible U.S. support, the kind of support, and I'm not sure on what, that past leaders couldn't get, why couldn't he do it? Why would that seem then bad to his voters or to those who support him? Wouldn't that be an asset for him?
I don't think it would be seen as bad for his voters. We need to remember the big base of evangelists that support Bolsonaro, and this base would definitely be happy with the move. I think that what Marisa says, that it would have maybe some effect on the trade relations that Brazil has with other countries, and that Bolsonaro might not want to take this risk. I think that we also need to remember the fact that we are dealing with Bolsonaro. So it's like a little bit like dealing with Trump. Something are uncertain, and even though maybe the logic would say
in the morning or no?
maybe even when the logic says one thing, he would be more concerned with the fact that this was a promise that he gave and that he wants to fulfill this promise. So it's really difficult to say. As Marisa said, nobody knows. But I wouldn't say that he would definitely not do it. I can't say that he would definitely will, but
I think in the House of Representatives, or how it's called there, he doesn't have a majority.
No.
So it's very
Lula maintained the power in the Congress, yes. So it will be very difficult, especially now in the context of economic crisis. So he will need to take a very difficult and unpopular decision in different sectors, especially in different sectors. So I don't know how we'll deal with another problem, like to affect the participation of Brazil in international markets.
Okay. Questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm BBC News. I'm just wondering about the move of the embassy, so to go back to that. How much of it could be a calculation? I heard the explanation about the markets and how much that's a calculation and so on. But from internal Brazil influences, how much is the evangelist base, and on the other hand, how much is the donors, who are the big industrialists who give him the donations for the campaigns, who also have a say in what Bolsonaro does?
But you have also the army. You need to understand that the coalition of Bolsonaro is very complicated. It's not only the evangelical or one part of the evangelical movement. You have also the army, and the army, they have a very clear agenda, so it will be very, very complicated, because you have also a Minister of Finance, that he's from a neoliberal school, Chicago boys, but the army, they see the state like a big, very important actor in the economy. So it will be very complicated for him to articulate this kind of puzzle. And we need to see how Israel we enter in this puzzle. Understand? Because, okay.
I think that the big donors would have a say, some say, but we still need to remember that most of the Brazilian export to the Arab states is based in a few, it's based on a few companies in Brazil, a few, not a big number of companies. So yeah, it's the beef, it's the beef and the chicken and so producers. So it's not like the whole the business community would be against it. Most of the donors are coming from companies that has nothing to do with the issue, so probably there won't be any pressure from them. But there will be pressure from JBS and other companies that definitely can be affected by that.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Miriam. I'm Brazilian. I write to different outlets as a freelancer. In Brazil, I'm asking for in Brazil, we hear a lot from businessmen that if the government let them work, so they will do a good job in economics, right? Like they are splitting themselves from politics. Is it possible to think that maybe, yes, it's going to be growth in our relationship with them in terms of business, despite the politics? Like, he won't be able to destroy it, to harm it?
First, I don't think he would like to harm it. I think that, that on the business arena with Israel right now, he will be pushing for more cooperation from Israel. I think that that's the message that the industry and the businessmen are getting now from his meetings with Netanyahu. You see the Brazilian media, and they all talk about the economic cooperation that he wants to institute with it. He wants to create with Israel. So I think there will be a push from the government right now in that direction. The big companies, as you said, they always worked with Israel, even, as I said, despite a few political feuds that we had with the Brazilian government. So they didn't stop working from Israel, but I think that now it's a big opportunity of having more and more of this cooperation, because it's in the media. You probably see, I was amazed by that, but the amount of media coverage that Netanyahu's visit gets in the Brazilian is amazing. It's like it's almost the leader of the power visiting Brazil, and I was asked about it in the radio today, and I was having difficulties answering that, because why does he get so? But he does. And I think that this kind of thing infiltrate into the business community. So the business community see that now the government is pro relations with Israel, is trying to encourage relations with Israel, and I think that many of them would get the message and be more willing to do business with Israel. Definitely.
Yes.
What's the situation for the Jewish community? I know very little about Brazil, I must admit. What's the situation for the Jewish community in Brazil, and will it change now with the change of government? How do they feel there?
As much as I saw, there was some part of the Jewish community reserved, I mean, during the campaign and Bolsonaro and others. But I think with the visit now, with the media, with all this trend and Israel in a much favored colors, of course, is to see the implementation in economic and cooperation. It takes time, but the mood the move is a positive, and I think the community will go with that. There is the Jewish community. This is not, if you compare it with the Arab community, involvement in the parliament and others is a very lower scale politically, but they are very much respected, and with some elements, some personalities that really were involved in the past and also in the current and in the academic life. The Albert Einstein Hospital, which is very, very famous, parallel to the Lebanese and Syrian hospital with the cooperation. During the time of President Lula, I don't know his own relations of Bolsonaro now with the community, but during that time he had some advisors, Clara Arndt, that was involved in all this government
the last foreign minister, Sarah, was a big friend of the Jewish community.
Yes. Previously there was Celso Laffer that was from the Jewish community. There were many personalities that were running and going with this, and also this evangelical. It's growing. The part of evangelical during my time, it's growing.
They love us for the wrong reason.
We know what Begin said about
That was a big discussion. Also,
beggars can't be choosers.
It was really a big discussion during the American ambassador.
Sure.
And it's the same, but it's a segment that is very much strong in the parliament, in the Congress. There is very, and Crivella is the mayor of Rio de Janeiro. He was a very important senator that time. So it's a part really not to ignore. I would like just to take this opportunity because I didn't mention, but it was during the Prime Minister Netanyahu now also was mentioned. Will the foreign policy will move in the respect of the voting in the UN, and that was one mention of element, and this is a big question whether they're going to. I remember there is a great frustration at that time when I was there was a big campaign of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, to change. You know, in the UN there are 22 resolutions, ancient resolutions, that automatically they're raised. And there was a whole campaign with all over the world, let's try to mention, not to all those 22, but several resolutions to abolish, to cancel. And I came to this campaign with great enthusiasm, and this, and I met with. Nothing was changed, and they were terrible also in the Council of Human Rights. It was awful that time, and they continue with this. This is very tough to change, but that element with the economic, with the whole new mood now, that will be to see whether there will be some change.
But it's part of the history of the relationship between Israel and Brazil. In 1975, they voted
for the Zionism, as
a racism. So
exactly,
one of the most important Latin American countries that support this initiative.
Exactly.
Regarding the community, the Jewish community, the leaders of the communities support in general Bolsonaro, especially from Rio. The most famous speeches of Bolsonaro against women and so on was in the Jewish community of Rio de Janeiro. But for Jews in Brazil, not for the community, for Jews, Bolsonaro is a problem because they don't know how to deal with this kind of
same thing with the Americans.
Exactly.
How large is the Jewish community? What are the numbers?
Around 120,000.
One of the most rich community in Latin America, together with Mexico.
Yes, please. And
Dr. Rimon, you said he doesn't have a majority in parliament. Can you elaborate a bit about the legislative procedures? For instance, in foreign questions...
He will need a coalition. He will need a coalition in the parliament in order to govern, to take decision. And we don't know. At this moment, we don't know what kind of coalition he will organize in the parliament. It's a big question.
Even in foreign policy questions, he needs the majority in parliament. Is there a Senate as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But we need
Two
to remember
ones.
that the Brazilian Congress is worse than the Knesset. Yeah, it has so many parties, and this Congress is the one with the most parties in the history of the democracy, of Brazilian democracy. So he has lots of actors within the, and I guess he would be able to bring a coalition, because in Brazil you do bring a coalition. The difference, or yeah, of course there are the parties from the left like PT and PSOL, but most of the parties do not have a very strict ideological line that would say we do not go with PT and PSOL will not go with them, but most of the other parties would be able to offer some kind of cooperation in the coalition.
Until when has he present the government, or what happens if he doesn't succeed?
The government will be impossible to take decisions. It will be, he will need to negotiate with the different parties. At the end, he will succeed, but I don't know what kind of decisions he will be. It will be, yes, he will be possible to take. I don't know. Really, it's a big question until now. And the idea, the first idea, at least during the campaign, was the famous 3B: ball, Bible, and meat. That's a way in Portuguese. That's his idea was to try to construct kind of coalition with different members of the parliament without any relation with the parties. For example, evangelistic members in the PT, or from different parties. This was his idea, but really we don't know. But at least at this moment.
Yes, please.
That was my original question that you finally addressed a little bit, these evangelicals. Now that you mentioned the numbers of the Jews, how could you give an estimate in numbers or percentages, or how significant his background
When
is?
we talk about the evangelical movement, we need to know that we talk about one group. The evangelic movement and not all the evangelical movement are in favor of Bolsonaro. Only the Pentecostales, the Iglesia Universal de la Fe, that is a special group in the evangelical movement, and they have a lot of power. Really, we don't know exactly. In general, during the Lula or Dilma president, you know, administration, you know that you have also evangelical people in the left wing. You don't have only evangelical people in the right wing. You have also with Lula, you have evangelical people. So it's very difficult to talk about the one special group with a clear agenda.
Yes, please.
You mentioned briefly Iran. Could you elaborate more of the relations today and perspective of the relation between Iran and Brazil?
Iran and Brazil has mostly economic relations, and in the era of Lula, he was even visiting Iran. He was trying to broker a deal, and I don't know if you remember that, but he was actually trying to take the role of the superpowers and broker a deal between Iran and the superpowers. He managed to do something, but was absolutely rejected by the U.S. And its allies. So he saw himself as having a very important role in that. He was quite disappointed when they rejected it, and then he let go a little bit. Nowadays, I think that it's mainly in the Dilma era. In the era of Dilma, it was completely forgotten, the whole thing, because Dilma didn't invest as Lula in foreign relations. She was very quiet on the international arena. So the relations stayed on the economic and the trade side, and this is where it stands now. I don't know what would happen with Bolsonaro, if it would be affected by the fact that Bolsonaro is not, to say the least, not a big supporter of Iran. I don't know if it would affect the relations between Brazilian companies and Iran. I don't know if Bolsonaro would adhere to the American sanctions. These are questions that he didn't comment, as far as I know, he didn't comment about, and it remains to be seen.
I think that he will approve the agenda of the army in the case of Iran. This is my...
Which is what?
In general, to participate in international consensus, not a special or different idea. And this was one of the problems between the army and Lula.
They
Last one.
played with
Last
the International Agency of Atomic Energy. They were members in the council. There was always our dialogue with them in order to bring the situation of nuclear plan program of Iran. They didn't like, I'm talking about previous, I don't know now with the Bolsonaro housing, they didn't like the way Iran took, with cheating and bringing, developing that time the program. But that in the perspective of the international arena organizations, they stick to that together.
Okay,
The army has a very clear agenda. Brazil first. This is the most important. You need to understand.
Not Israel first.
Brazil first. So it will be.
I would like to ask you to return to the Jewish community for a bit, and I'm a bit interested, and maybe it's too much insider baseball, but maybe you can comment on the relationship between the State of Israel and particularly the embassy in Brasilia and the Jewish community. It started, relations were tense when Danny Dayan was nominated, and Danny Dayan was not happy with how the Jewish community did not stand up for him and fight for him. And it seems to me that the Israeli government and the ambassador, who is a political appointee, Yossi Sheli, have not forgotten that the organized Jewish community at the time did not stand up for Netanyahu's appointee and are being snubbed. And I'm hearing from Rio now that they are being sidelined, at least what I understand to be the Jewish community, Konib. And also at the Jewish community event yesterday, nobody from Konib was asked to speak, only this guy, Osias Volman, who is
honorary
consul, which means absolutely nothing. He just happens to be a supporter of Yossi Sheli and the Netanyahu government. And I hear there's some tension. If any of you could shed some light on that.
The issue of the Jewish community is more complicated than Iran.
Generally speaking, myself in many countries, it's all, and in Israel as well, as you know, you have one Jew on the island, you'll have two synagogues, no? So it's always complicated, but it's general.
I don't want to even.
Well, he was going to.
I don't have to go on. Jewish community is for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for years and years. This is a major for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Is always a Jewish community, and it doesn't matter what is the size. Is it smaller or bigger or whatever? It's our not main, but one of the main pillars in our working. And personally, I can say from my experience. So when I came to Brazil, there was after closing the two consulates, first in Rio and then in Sao Paulo. And as such,
budgetary.
Yeah. It was absolutely. There was a big number of Israeli representation, whether consulates or embassies that closed. Always, it was for our as employee in the ministry. It's always a disaster because we didn't want, and some of them they reopen, and the budget is doubled when you do the close and then reopen it. So we didn't like, of course, this. As an ambassador, embassy itself, we had to, as you know, the size of Brazil. I mean, to see all the picture and running only from Brasilia. You know, even for consular matters, if you lose your passport and you need to come to the consulate, so the people had to travel to Brasilia from all parts to issue a new passport. It was terrible. So 4 years I worked on reopening at least São Paulo, because São Paulo really it was politically, economically undone, but they reopened it. So finally, but it put on the embassy to go to the Jewish community in all over Brazil. A great deal of it was a challenge, because really to give every community attention and visits, and we did it quite a lot. So traveling, and every time, okay, you meet the governor, you meet other, but mainly with the Jewish communities. And
he's
also,
talking about today. Today, there are surveys.
But there are discussions, and Konibe and other. I think as Ministry of Foreign Affairs, even I'm out of this is a very important part as the Jewish community, not to enter to all the discussions between to enter, but as an umbrella, and to see cooperation, and always invited all the fractions and to have inclusive to and not against. So I don't know with this.
Who are the factions? CONIB is the main.
CONIB is the umbrella, is the umbrella of all the Jewish federations, because in each community, in each country, in each state, of course, the bigger is São Paulo and Rio, of course. Don't ignore, I mean, just the honorary consul generally. Honorary consul is very important for us, because especially in places that we don't have the presentation, and they closed. Rio was their capital that time before moving to Brazil. It was important, and it's important community. So honorary consul, we have it all over the countries. We maintain a lot of honorary consul. He was president previously to that. Whether they have some fights on one issue or another, this is, I don't want to say normal, but it's all over. You find it in the United States, in other countries, in everywhere.
Thank you.
You know,
we have a house rule, 1 hour, and we let you go. So I want to thank Ambassador Tzipora Rimon. I want to thank Rosenblatt-Nir and Dr. Rimon.
But we don't let you go, because we want to invite you to share with us a glass of wine and to accept the new year, and also some sandwiches. And also, before you get up, today is not only the birth of the new year, but it's also Mauritius' birthday.
This is the most important.
Thank you for coming up, and this is for you, but more for your wife, for letting you come on your day off.